that's like an interesting thing because like you are obviously a comic book fan. We've talked comic stuff already. I mean, would it be like one of your ideal like jobs to work on one of their Disney like the Disney Marvel movies, or are you just kind of like not about it? Okay.
No, they're committees.
Okay.
Like I said, I don't think the movies that Disney made were bad. I know I've talked about their bad stories, but they weren't trying to be. They were trying to serve the public. The business model was, you know, when you show up at McDonald's and you drive through with screaming kids and you order Happy Meals, you know, they don't want you to shove a filet mignon in that box. The audience, they want the fucking Happy Meal because the kids are screaming. I'm a dad. You know, I've fed my kids Happy Meals. They don't want it to be a personal expression. They want it to be another Happy Meal. Well, the Marvel movies are kind of the same thing, I think. I think working on them would be a lot of, I mean, you have to be one of those kind of people who is happy being part of a system and being lauded out and being like, you know, and going to Comic-Con and, you know, putting on the hat and doing the panel, which I've done. You've got to get you've got to get more out of that than, you know, actual honest creative decisions, you know. It's not like making an indie film where, you know, the director and maybe one producer and possibly and maybe the lead actor are working together to try to do something under really, you know, usually under tough circumstances, but they're really, really pushing themselves and everybody around them. It's a big budget technical, you know, it's a ride.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's nothing. Do you ever watch online that YouTube series, Every Frame a Picture, Every Frame a Painting? It's a brilliant thing where, you know, people, this filmmaker, editor actually, you know, breaks apart, you know, Jackie Chan fights and, you know, deconstructs them so you understand why they're always so good and great editing and stuff. And one of the things he did was he took apart the Marvel movies and he realized they're horribly shot movies. You know, they're interesting, they're digital, they've got a lot of great special effects, they've got a lot of spectacle to them, but the Star Wars films and the Marvel movies are not well shot. And I don't mean like incompetent. I mean, there's just, they're very mechanical. You know, sit everybody at the table and, you know, get your coverage and move. You know, and you compare that to, you know, their assembly line. They're Happy Meals. Again, I'm not, like I said, it's not like Happy Meal or a filet mignon. People want the Happy Meals. I want the Happy Meal. But what I want to do is I want to make a filet mignon. I want to make a bolus. I want to work on a horror film. I want to make an R-rated film. I want to make, you know, but I made Postman Pat, which is this wonderful G-rated film in England that's shown every Christmas morning. You know, that is as sweet and sincere as you can get. You know, I want to do all these different things and I want to do them well, but I want to grow as an artist and push as hard as I can each time. I don't want to be just part of a system.
Gotcha.
You know,
I'm kind of interested in like when you find like a project that catches your eye or an idea that like kind of sparks some inspiration, like is there a certain like thing about that idea or that project that attracts you? Like, is there a certain thing that you find yourself?
Yeah. And it's always, and I can usually conceptualize it. And then it's the thing I keep in front of me. I usually have it on a sticky pad somewhere. Like the Hoodwinked movie, it was the first female-driven hero. She was a superhero. She solved crimes, and that's the first time a woman had been presented doing that in animation.
Cool.
She's a hero, and I wanted that. So it was all about pushing her heroism. She was doing it for the right reasons. She wasn't doing it because she was scared. Yes, she was going through some emotional stuff, but she wasn't doing it because she had to. She wasn't just being tortured until a boy can come save her. She wasn't, you know, she wasn't supporting a pre-existing monarchy with her bullshit. She didn't suddenly have superpowers and then decide to support, you know, the existing, you know, the existing power structures with them. You know, she didn't managed to join the team. It wasn't anything like that. She was doing right because she wanted to. She saw it as her obligation. And her grandmother had done right before her. And they were willing to sacrifice their lives if that's what it took. And you'd never seen anybody like that in an animated film before. You've seen lots of people like that, but never a female. So there was that. When I did The Origin of Stitch, it was, I got to dramatize the moment where Stitch, really, really accepted the fact that he was created to be a monster. And Jumba wanted him to be a monster. But he wasn't. And Jumba saw him as and that was important to me. And that's what that was about. And I could go through all of them. When I was doing the R-rated movies, they were about something. The Rashomon thing was about 4 stories of 4 different people who tried to do the right thing, and each one of them was destroyed by a system in different ways. But one was a father who lost a son, and another one was a guy who had lost his arm, who was desperately trying to save his crew. One was a woman who was trying to expose the conspiracy behind it. And another one was, the 4th one was a scumbag who got what he deserved. Dante's Inferno is clearly a morality play. I think a lot of it may come down to my religious upbringing, actually, when I think about it, because Postman Pat was about someone, a big business, Hollywood in this case, or TV, was trying to seduce this small town, gentle, loving husband and father who was a huge part of his community away from that life. And we got to, talk about social commentary. Wacky Races was almost all satire about how, shitty and pointless American culture is, that was just, I know it's like, well, it's a race show. No, it wasn't. It was a satire of how crappy America can be. So there's always something, I've got a show I'm developing right now that is, it's for young children. I've been asked to develop them for a series of very, very well done storybooks. And what it is about the fact that, a particular character is being taught every week that there's no kind of love, no matter how different from the kind of love you understand, that isn't wonderful. It's a transgender, it's a genderless character who's dealing with all, and the point is like, look, love is always wonderful, always. And I learned that as I grew up and my children became people, and they turned out to be very different people than I thought they were going to be. And I realized that the trappings of love or the package love comes into isn't nearly as important as love, and so on and so forth. There's always something. Sometimes it's, and it has to be more than just these wacky cows are going to go on the hero's journey, except they're not really.
Yeah.
It's just got to be more than that to me. I've been directing some other shows, and I can get through maybe 3 or 4, and I'm like, look, this show isn't about anything. I just don't have anything to give it. It's got to be about something. So I don't think I'd be good in the Marvel universe, but I have high hopes for WandaVision.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So all your directing, has it always been animated films? Have you tried any like live action directing, or like actually like working with like real people?
Directed 3 live action.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
How did that compare to like your animation directing? Like, did you like just do it for you want to do it, or
in one way it's very, very, very satisfying because it's those movies. You realize that when you're on set and you're like running as fast as you can, there's no time to rewrite anybody's stuff. So your words end up pretty closely on there, and it's very collaborative. One of the lead actors I work with all the time is a guy named Peter Woodward. He's Sir Edward Woodward's son, and he's part of the great acting dynasty that is the Woodwards in England. And Peter's also a writer and a historian, and he and I are very good friends. We're both huge history buffs, and so we spend a lot of time just nerding out about Alexander. And everybody around us eventually leaves, but we just keep going. so you work with, like, let's say if Peter's your leading man, then, the relationship with the leading man and that collaborative structure means a lot. If you're working with a professional, good, talented DP, that can be great. The problem with a lot of low budget live action film is that you don't always get people of that caliber. You get a DP who's just got his dad's camera, doesn't know what they're doing, or you get an actor who maybe can't handle stuff. So it can be wonderful, or it can be hell, depending on the mix of people, and that usually has a little something the budget,
Yeah.
But the great joy of it is that you can turn one of these things around in 6 months. You can write it in 3 months, shoot it in a month and a half, and then take it through editing. Yeah, and then you have something, and you can move on to something else. The nice thing about TV, I like about TV, and I've directed a little TV, is TV directing on somebody else's show is just, again, you're just there to, like, do it. You're gonna stop trying to be creative. You're gonna just get it done on time and on budget. But it's great to be able to, like, okay, this is all about, we did this thing, Dolphin Island, and there was strong religious written into the script. And a couple of the actors, felt, really, that really appealed to them. And we ended up, the movie has ended up being released on, like, through faith-based organizations. We didn't mean to do that. It was just, the fact that, this family was going through this hardship, and they relied on this very non-specific global faith, in each other and God. In a way that I never could, obviously these people are way better than me, was really fun to do. I mean, it just kind of, like, took over as we went, and I let it do it because I'm not going to be on this thing for 3 years. Let's just do this for,
knock it out.
Do this for, like, 6 months. And then when it's over, I'll go do something else. You kind of feel a little freer, like, letting it be its own thing and going down the rabbit hole with it, because you'll be out soon. But if you're trying to make a 4-quadrant animated family film for Disney or DreamWorks or something like that, it in the end of the day, they want their Happy Meal, and you got to keep that in mind, and you have to do it. And I've done it. You can, but you have to keep in mind that this is a huge economic thing you're driving. And, it's geared at a particular audience, and you have to keep that in mind constantly. You can't, like, really, like I said, chase the artistic expression down a hole the way you can with an indie film, even a horror film or something like that. As long as there's jump scares, you can have a serious discussion about what's the nature of good and evil, what's the nature of a god, what's the nature of a devil, there's a wonderful one we did recently where it turned out that the lead character you'd been with had been dead the whole time. And it was all about what the nature of the afterlife might be like. And, that kind of stuff is great. And you can't really explore stuff like that in these animated. I mean, I got to do it a couple times in the Dead Space stuff and El Super Beasto and stuff like that, but you usually can't do that in animation. Animation is, despite what Brad Bird says, it is indeed a genre. Just the money that goes into it forces it to be. It's either a dirty sitcom or it's a very expensive 4-quadrant spectacle, and that's it. The way American financing and distribution works just forces it into that.
So, you said you like to draw, and now they're kind of moving away from actual drawing. It's all computers and digital. Have you ever tried to go back to, like, printed media, like comics and stuff like that? Have you ever, like, think about, like, trying your hand in that?
No, it's motion. Okay. It's making things move. I do storyboards, and that's filmmaking. Mm-hmm. Comics, especially these days, with all the heavy photographic reference and the atrocious screen direction. Okay, there's no way to say this. American comics are drawn for shit, and they have been for a few years, and they just are. They're basically trying so hard to be movies. It's basically another frustrated live action storyboard artist who's got technique but not training. Now you compare that to like somebody like John Byrne or Tom Grummett or George Perez or Jack Kirby or Steve Ditko, and you look at those things and they could be storyboards. They are, brilliantly, Alex Ross, I mean, and anybody, Wally Woods, 18 setups that always work is a famous, he drew like 18 panels that always work in comics. Mm-hmm. All these geniuses, Will Eisner obviously was the best. And you look at the craft that went into a comic page, and that was held together by, Kurt Swan and a lot of the great, Gil Kane, all the great artists of the Silver Age. And then, as what often happens, the best thing destroyed it. Neil Adams came in, and what Neil could do was all that composition and all that photography and all that storytelling, like Will Eisner could, but he also did it in this tremendous flashy way. This beautifully drawn, his technique was just very flashy. And now all we have is, like the rest of American culture, all we have is the flash, and we don't have this stuff underneath it. And I know that sounds horrible, but but you pull up a George Perez Avengers comic where they're fighting Ultron, and then pull up something that has been published in the last 2 months, and you can see the difference. The visceral.
It's that soul element, like you just miss that. Like it doesn't feel like it breathes and lives.
Yeah, I mean, the incredible. I mean, you can go through a comic and not read it. Back in the old days, especially Marvel, right? I say in the old days. I'm talking about the '90s or and you can tell what the story is, and then Brian Bendis gets in, and it's like page after page after page of the same headshot, repeated over and over and over again, so he can do his clever little dialogue, and that's fine. But you're in the wrong medium. What you want to be doing is writing scripts for TV. The visual impact of comics is Will Eisner, probably the most influential comic book artist who ever lived. What he talked about was the thundering impact of the sequential drawing. His spirit stuff is stunning, and everybody learned from that. I mean, even Jack Kirby and those guys. Jack Kirby, the thundering impact of sequential art. Steve Ditko, and then moving on. You just don't open up a comic book these days, and there's a few exceptions. There's John Romano Jr. is still drawing, but he's got thundering impact all over him, right? But you just don't open up a but you just don't. Yeah, the art director of Marvel for 30 years. That's a good training. Yeah. But you just don't open a Superman comic, and what you're looking at is pinups.
Yeah, it's
very difficult to feel that fact, the power of Superman, when you're looking at just, here's a 2-page spread of him talking while he floats. But look at what Kurt Swan did. Kurt Swan never did stuff like that. Every panel was always packed with information and imagination and information in the same tag. And then there's another guy who I love who also used the Xerox head thing, but brilliantly, is Keith Giffen. Keith Giffen, right? I mean, I'm going to admit something to you guys that is like farting in a restaurant. I think his Legion run 5 years later was brilliant.
Okay.
Because talk about the thundering impact of sequential art. He just, really, really, really just sucked you into that world. And people didn't like it because it wasn't the Legion, and I get that. He was doing his own thing, and but he did it so powerfully and so well. And I just don't see that as pop. What comics just aren't that anymore. They're kind of like the ugly stepchildren of film, and I don't think they should be. I'm probably pissed off too many people at this point to continue talking, but
no, but the points you're making, like, it's no longer like the creative art of it. Like it's being directed by like the Disneys, where it's like you gotta sell this comic so the movie sells. Kind of like where like they're forcing them to do all this stuff,
which is insane because it's different audiences. We have statistical analysis that proves to us that the people who buy comic books, are yes, they watch the movies. They're going to anyways, but nobody watches the movie and then runs to the local hard to find comic book store.
My wife loves all the comic movies, but she'll never pick up an actual book and read it. Like I literally have long boxes of comics, like 20 years of collecting comics, and she'll never pick up a single one to read. Like not even casually. She's like, I got nothing else to read today. Let me go pick up like fucking Batman Hush or something. And it's just no, she'll never do that. She'll watch some bullshit on TV.
Exactly. I mean, I've got sons who love comic book characters, and I'm so desperate to get them to read comics. You know, I'm pulling out things like, let me show you the original, you know, Doctor Strange, Eternity arc that Steve Ditko did. You know, or you know what? Let's look at some Avengers. You know, maybe when John Buscema was drawing them. You know, this is some really cool shit, and I can't get him to read it.
That's so heartbreaking.
I know it is like, you know, just read Silver Surfer #4. Just Silver Surfer #4. Just read that before you die. That's the one with Thor, for those of you who didn't know. And it's like, and you can't get in, and this art form is just kind of gone, you know. And I don't know why. It's depressing. And it, you know, and they're dying now. You know, these great. You know, the great, they're all in their 70s and 80s, you know. George Perez has eye issues. He's quit. You know, John Byrne's retired he's doing fan fiction on his website, you know. Have you guys seen that?
No, I have not, but that's awesome. I'll have to look into it.
Check that out.
It's brilliant. He's doing this thing. It's fan fiction. And it's like, he's picked up the X-Men run that when he left it back in the 80s after Dark Phoenix, he picked it up like he hadn't quit. He picked it up like Chris Claremont quit. He got to keep going with all the storylines he wanted to do. And he's done like 18 really cool. of them on his website. Yeah.
Awesome,
that's awesome.
I think he's calling it Elsewin.
Is he getting in trouble with like is he getting in trouble with like Marvel at all for like cease and desist orders, or are they kind of just letting him do it?
Well, because Marvel, the comic publishing arm of Marvel is, nobody gives a shit. I think it's three people, you know, in a trailer on the back lot of, you know, the Disney lot, you know, with the internet on their phones,
just basically
just, you know, yeah. I mean, I think, you know, that, you know, constant suicide attempts, but they, you know, they never managed to get, you know, and they just don't care, you know, which is too bad. But if you read the thing that John's doing and you look at him and you realize that this guy in his 70s is still at the peak of his power. His visual storytelling is amazing. And then every night, you know, and then, you know, I'll go, I get, you know what, the exception to all this might be the Immortal Hulk, which is visually amazing. Have you guys followed the Immortal Hulk?
No, I'm not really well on new stuff, especially Marvel.
The Immortal Hulk might be the exception if you start at the beginning of that run. It's okay. Talk about the thundering power of sequential art. But, you know, you pick up, you know, almost anything. And you look at it, and then you go look at John Byrne's fan art. And you're like, shit, I'll just wait for this to upload every day.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So no, I've never really. I mean, I think I learn a lot from these guys, and clearly I study them. You know, and Jim Starlin and John Buscema were the guys who I used to copy their panels when I was trying to learn human anatomy. Before I found Bridgman, you know, and the guys they studied. But no, it just doesn't seem like there's a place for people like me in comics anymore. I feel that more and more, that there's just no place. It's hard to be an artist in America these days. It really is. It's very easy to be
a sellout.
I guess so. I mean, I think a lot of people who are so selling out didn't have anything else to offer. So it's not like, you know what I mean?
They're only trading up at this point.
Look, yeah, this influencer is such a sellout. Yeah, because wearing a bikini on Instagram, if she wasn't doing that, she'd be performing heart surgery. No, this is pretty much it, you know? So it's hard to say the word sellout, because the assumption is like, if you weren't doing this, you'd be contributing in some way. And I'm not sure that's true. But yeah, I don't know. Art doesn't have to be stupid. You know, okay, yeah, action movies, you know, have a limit, right?
Yeah.
But art doesn't have to be stupid, and neither does popular entertainment. There was a time when they were the same thing. They were a time when John Ford was making brilliant movies like The Searchers and Stagecoach, and Americans watched them and were entertained. I guess I could go on and on talking about, but there was a time when American popular entertainment was actually also art, and it's not anymore. And I think for good reasons. I don't think that's accidental. I think a quiet, docile, unquestioning populace works well for the giant corporations who now own every part of our lives. And it'll keep turning off my internet to keep me quiet.
It's been working fine since he stopped like bashing Disney. So
yeah. Look at that.
I wasn't really, but again, I wasn't really bashing them, because what I was saying was like
it's
look,
true.
I mean, they're doing the thing they want to do brilliantly. It's just, they really are. I mean, you've got to admire them. I mean, in order to make a McDonald's Happy Meal, you have to like build a McDonald's. You have to get all those machines built. You have to design them. You have to, get all the properties. You have to put up the franchises. You have to, get the bread. You have to get all the stuff. You have to get a distribution system. You have to deforest the Brazilian rainforest and kill the lungs of the world to grow the meat. I mean, you have to do all this stuff to get a Happy Meal out. And they do it better than anybody. And so does Disney. Disney does it better than anybody. But I don't know that at the end of the day, American culture is better off because, they existed. I don't know that it's worse off. I don't know that it's better off, though.
If Disney came to you tomorrow to direct the Adam Warlock movie, you have full control over everything. You can do whatever you want. I mean, I'm sure they'll say you can do whatever you want, but obviously, they're not going to really do that. Would you turn them down though, or would you give it a go?
Well, first of all, that was a nonsense sentence. Disney's going to come to you and offer you creative control. Sure. Yeah. Because the first that is out of their mouth isn't always, if you're lucky enough to come in here, you will obey every word we say, or you will be instantly destroyed. And here, this is your child, a time bomb strapped to their ass, and we'll kill them first. And I mean, and that's,
Master.
And that's no different than every other corporation in America. Yeah. Disney isn't even evil compared to everybody else.
They have bounce houses.
The bounce, I mean, they were like, well, look, idiots. Let's treat them like idiots. They weren't making us idiots. Like, if we'd all stood there offended, that would have been one thing. But they leapt into the bounce house, didn't they? They yelled "we" on their way in. I'll never understand fucking animators. Anyways,
the most diabolical bounce houses of all time.
Yeah. But no, I will do projects with the creative merit for anybody. Because it's not my job. I mean, this is a podcast. We're doing social commentary.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my job as an artist to give a crap about any of that, other than how it affects whatever it is I'm trying to tell story-wise. If I happen to be doing a story about, or a piece of art about, evil corporations, I'm sure Disney's going to, absolutely hire me to do that. But if they came to me and said, like, you can do Adam Warlock. If I had something about Adam Warlock, I mean, my only concern is that I don't think the Adam Warlock arc that Jim Starlin did would be a particularly good movie. You know what I mean? It's too long. His just to get into it, like his whole thing with Captain Marvel was to take a warrior and turn him into a priest, and his whole thing with Warlock was to take a saint and turn him into a demon, a devil, a madman. Mm. You can't do that in
2
movie.
hours. Yeah.
You just can't. There's story structure, and people can only absorb information so quickly. You'd need a series of movies to do that. Think of how he started as the savior of Counter Earth, and then ended up as this insane suicidal madman. And then to do it without Thanos, what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, continuity standpoint, it would be kind of jacked up, but
What I'm, it is kind of a. I mean, I can see why the Marvel people ran away from it. And it's like, look, we've got Downey, we've got to get Iron Man and all these people big parts. To take a character like Adam Warlock, who is basically driven insane by his own sense of ethics in a universe that doesn't care about him. I mean, how do you fit that into that? Deeply interconnected universe they did. So I think
Yeah.
they did the right thing, is what I'm saying. You know,
I mean, it worked out for them. I mean, obviously, like, who are we to
Yeah.
argue? Like, they're laughing
Yeah.
to the bank.
yeah, exactly. You know, I wish
They don't care about the fanboys like protesting. Like, Adam Warlock should have got the gauntlet. Like, come on, like they don't care. Like, fuck off, nerds.
No, they don't. Yeah, and now they're going to do Kang.
Yeah,
You know, it's going to be the next big bad, and they're like, okay, that's great because he's like one of the coolest characters ever. But you've already fucked up the rules of time travel to the point of like nonsense. So now we're going to worry
it doesn't
about
matter
time
anymore.
travel
Fuck
villain?
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's their way into it. Like, it's like timelines are jacked up, whatever, and let's just introduce.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Kang the Conqueror. Like,
Yeah, in the same movie, I'm going to define time travel 3 completely different, contradictory ways. But what the hell? And then let's make our next big villain all about time travel. I'm like, yeah, that's going to work out great.
Yeah.
But their TV, I love their TV because it is more like comics. You know, that you can tell a long, complicated story. I mean, they're doing, you know, the Scarlet Witch Goes Nuts story, I think.
mhm.
With WandaVision, and that was a great, you know, by the way, John Byrne started that one in Avengers West Coast, and where, you know, her power just, you know, drove her nuts, and then that went through Avengers Disassembled and
House
of M and all that.
Yep.
And you know,
Yeah,
you
because
can't
she's like
tell that
literally
in a
like one of the
movie.
most powerful mutants like in Marvel. She's like up there. Like, she can create entire universes, entire like everything. And yeah, they did not do her justice in the movies.
Yeah, which is the power with OP characters. I mean, originally her power was she altered probabilities a little, and then
Yeah.
John Byrne, you know, just said, "Oh, well, that means that you can like reach back in time." And it's like, "Oh, John, are you sure you want to open that kid?" And then next thing you know, she's so OP,
It's
it's
wide
crazy,
open.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the problem with OP characters in general is that
Well, Magneto's
lead
got
you
some
to
good sperm.
great-
Like, like
but
all his
they lead-
offspring. I'm sorry.
I know Magneto's. Well, I mean, Magneto's a mess in and of himself, his whole story. But the thing about somebody like something like the Scarlet Witch, I mean, you could do a couple of TV series with that really, really
Yeah.
well, you know. But at the end of it, you know, she has to die. You know, the problem with comic books is you have these super, you know, overpowered characters and these epic great stories, and then I'm like, oh, and then you go back on the team, and then it always
Yeah.
like goes to hell after that.
Yeah.
But somebody like, but you've got the opportunity in TV if you're willing to do what Disney won't, which is then to, you know, get rid of the character. You can tell these awesome Alan Moore type stories, you know. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see, because they'll never let anything go. He's down Captain America and made him re-sign.
Yeah. He just resigned the
Yeah.
other day.
Yeah. It's, you know, Robert Downey Jr. actually killing Iron Man was amazing. I mean, I can't imagine anybody else getting away with that, you know.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they'll bring back another armored character, but TV is better for that. What I'm saying is you can do things in TV you can't do in movies.
Yeah.
You know, films have an expectation. You show up there for 2 hours and you expect a satisfying, oh my God, I almost made a sex analogy, but you expect to finish is what I'm saying. Okay. In a movie, you put a lot of effort into that. You spend a lot of money. You expect to finish. TV, you don't have to finish. You know, you can go, you know, you want to finish at the
Season
end of the
2.
series or the end of the
Yeah.
3-year commitment.
Yeah.
But you know, you can you can spend a lot of time exploring, bouncing around and stuff, you know, like Breaking Bad did or Better Call Saul. But you know, the characters' stories tend to wrap at the good stories like that. I hope they don't do the thing where they refuse to let go of a character because they've got IP and toys and all that stuff. We'll see.
Yeah.
But no, obviously I couldn't work for them because I don't think like them.
Yeah.
Has there ever been anything you've turned down that you wish you never, like, you didn't turn down, like later, like you saw come out, you're just like, oh, I could have done this way better if this guy fucked it up, or like was this just something like I didn't want to do it at the time and like I wish I can go back and change it, or has there never really been anything like that?
The exact opposite. I wish I'd turned
Okay.
down many things.
Oh. The process of working in Hollywood is that you know you're working
in an established culture wherever you go. And this is a little bit different than when I put together an indie film. I build my own culture, and I've got this no assholes rule. And those are kind of nice, but then you're still trying to you still have to work in the box. You still have a distributor. You're still trying to please, they hired you to do a particular product. You want to get it done. So don't get me wrong. You still do all that. But to actually work in Hollywood means you're walking into a culture every time you make a film. And very few of these cultures are, let's say, entirely healthy. Okay. It's just Hollywood doesn't lend itself to that. If you're a great businessman who has the ability to build a productive culture that gets the most out of your employees, both creatively and intellectually, you're probably not in Hollywood. You're probably building Amazon or something, right? Like I said, Amazon doesn't attract. Well, anyways, he says, remembering he hasn't retired yet. It's great.
I mean, but you turn them all off, right?
Yeah, but you join a culture.
Yeah,
and that culture dictates the product. Okay, I mean, and I'm not trying to diss anybody, but just because I recently saw it, that Wonder Woman film was done in a culture where nobody thought about the fact that Wonder Woman was raping somebody, right? I mean, this guy, this spirit took over this person's body and she raped him. If you turn that around, so I could put the spirit of my long dead wife into this hot supermodel's body, and then I proceeded to do that to them, people would lose their minds, right? Yeah. It was done in a culture where nobody thought about that. People, they didn't intend to do that. That wasn't their intention, but there was nobody in that culture to go, you've taken away that body's that human being's willpower, and you're forcing sex on them. There's a word for that. There was nobody in that culture to stop that.
Yeah.
And that's just one of the many things wrong with that movie, but that's a culture. When you come into a culture, you have to remember that, these cultures have perspectives, I mean, the BBC thinks the last, 5 or 6 seasons of Doctor Who is good. They're wrong.
Yeah.
But their culture is such that they're very happy with it.
No, but ratings are higher.
They're not.
That's all, oh, really?
The lowest ratings in 45 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the last 2 seasons have collapsed in the ratings. Just chirp them. That's what happens when you hire nerds. But what I'm saying is that there's nobody looking at these films, these TV shows before they go out, and walking into Chris's office and going, Chris, you forgot the story. You know what I'm saying? It's a culture. There's nobody there to do that. These cultures tend to weed people out who don't work in the culture, and that's not always the best creatively. The best culture is a frank place where people can, express different points of views and come from different backgrounds, and but that's very rare.
I mean, it's like that inbreeding mentality where it's all done in-house by in-house people, and everyone reviews it all in-house, and they're not getting an outside perspective. And,
and there's a defensiveness to it.
One good thing about all this potentially is that I think people they might not even know it, but I think that they're going to be starved for real art. I think our culture will be that way, and that gives somebody an opportunity to come up with a studio that might focus on that, and potentially.
I mean, but as Mike already said,
you're a wonderfully optimistic person.
Yeah.
No, I mean, everything you've said has been so nice and positive. You should start a studio because it would have a good culture. I should not. I'm sorry. I cut somebody off. I didn't.
But you were saying earlier, those situations won't exist because they're being edged out by those monopolies, where it's impossible to get those studios, that culture where you can actually get artistic people like yourself, where you can actually share your vision and share what you want to share instead of just that machine produced shit. And that's what we're just gonna get probably for the next 20 years, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, remember, I mean, let's be careful about saying the machine produces shit. The machine produces what the machine is designed to do.
Yeah, I mean, like without soul, without character, without
yeah, it's
like,
not
shit in the traditional sense, but
yeah, it's very rarely designed to
Traditional
examine
shit.
itself or its creators.
yeah.
It used to be. It's not now. But to talk about people are going to be starved for art. I think Americans won't be. I think we've crossed the Rubicon to the fall of the empire here. And I'm going to tell you why. Because to understand the difference between a McDonald's hamburger and a filet mignon, somebody has to at some point fed you a filet mignon before all your tastes are locked into the point where you just think it's wrong. If you're going to really appreciate ballet, you have to see it. You have to actually go to a ballet and sit down and watch it. You have to watch more than one. And you have to have somebody you respect and love and admire look at you and say, I know this seems strange to you, but I'm telling you, it's worthwhile to stick this out. You will get a satisfaction from this deeper than watching those YouTube videos. Nobody should watch YouTube. Turn it off, Ron. But somebody you respect has to bring you into art. You know, you can't. A lot of people walk through the Louvre and have no idea what they're looking at, or the Uffizi. When I was there with Glenn Villepeu, studying art in Italy, he walked us through and he was explaining to us the fact that, you know, the Uffizi is set up in such a way that it starts, you know, it works through time. Each of the rooms is actually set up as and he was explaining, you know, the paintings to us, you know, and we had been studying with him for years and we knew how to read paintings. And so many of the people at the Uffizi had no idea. They thought it was a painting of a guy naked on a horse, you know. They didn't realize it was telling a story because no one had ever taught them how to read it. In order for you to develop an appreciation of more subtle goodness, you have to have experienced it. And usually you have to have your hand held by somebody who understands and that you respect. A parent or an uncle or some teacher has to walk you through it and say, look, this image has a lot of things going on, and it requires you to have knowledge to understand it. So let me show you. Let me help you get something out of this that you couldn't just get without knowing this. That's true of music. I assume I'm terrible at music. I have no idea, you know, but I listen to operas because I've been going to opera since I was a kid. My dad made me. He's like, and he sat me there and he said, it's not screaming Italians. There's more going on. and I got it, right? The same thing with musical theater, the same thing with plays, same thing with Shakespeare. There were people who introduced me to it who I respected, and they got me to overcome my instinct of like, I just want to go back and read those comics again. You know, you have to be brought into it. It's like great cooking. You know, foie gras is amazing, evil, but amazing. Truffles are amazing. But the first time you eat a truffle, you know, it tastes like it tastes like literally congealed farts. You know, it takes a while for you to develop the palate. You know, my son and I love sushi, but it was because I love sushi and I brought him with me and he worked his way through it. I couldn't get the other two kids to eat sushi. They won't go near it. And, you know, it opened up a whole palate for us. And we go, you know, all over the world together eating, you know, this amazing sushi. But he wouldn't have just, you know, one day put down his cheeseburger and picked up a raw piece of fish.
Yeah, it'd be hard to convince a kid to eat some urchin or something.
Right. But, you know, if you can get to it in steps, it's a sad, you know, you still eat your cheeseburgers, but now you've got this additional more thing. Books are like that. You know, Hemingway is not the first time. Neither is Steinbeck, you know, and so on. It's, you know, J.R. Tolkien is greatest writer who ever lived. But so when you say like people are going to be starving for art, I don't think you starve for a meal you've never had.
Yeah.
You know, and if America has really just given up on anything like intellectual curiosity and honesty, if it's just politics and warring cultures and hating each other so that people who run cable news can make money, if it's just hate the other, then what is art going to talk to you about? Because the point of art is for me to get you to walk in somebody else's shoes for a while, usually before you realize it. You know, the point of art is to see the world through someone else's eyes for a while. That's the point of art. That's what it's always been, is to, you know, see humanity as godlike when we feel we're shit, or to empathize with the other, to see the common experiences of all humanity and what that means to be a part of that as an individual. Where are Americans developing a taste for that now? I mean, look, Trump, we're recording this the day Biden got sworn in. I was no fan of Trump, but today was depressing too. I mean, where are Americans developing a taste for honest justice and compassion and empathy, which means empathizing with the people you don't agree with?
Yeah.
Democracy can't withstand that, much less art. I don't know.
That's the strongest test of empathy and compassion is having it for people you don't agree with.
Yeah. And it's the point of religion, by the way. It's the point of fucking religion, which is, and all art and stuff like that. It's like, look, you have to love each other. You have to find those things, those common things we're all dealing with. And even if I can't agree and love you for all this stuff, I can love you for that. Well, a lot of my movies, all my art is about that, I guess, deep down. Because that's just what art is about. Where is the American taste for art as opposed for the American taste for like satisfaction and justification? Yeah. A democracy that hates itself, that hates half of themselves, it's fucked. It's not going to work. But that's okay, because we're not a democracy now, and we certainly won't even look like one in 5 years or 15 years or 20. I mean, giant corporations taking over is actually the plot of Sentinel's Point of No Return, my podcast, available at YouTube and Spotify. But giant corporations taking over the earth, used to be science fiction. Now it's clearly, self-evident prophecy that I don't know how we get away from it. And the way to stop them is art. Give people a taste for art.
Yeah.
Let them think differently. Let them read books that are about more than just entertainment. Let them see movies. One of the greatest movies, Frank Capra, the greatest American filmmaker. Sorry, Steven. We used to make movies about things, Meet John Doe, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, all these amazing movies about, cruel being wrong. And they were breathtakingly good entertainment. They're not preachy. You're right there with everybody. I mean, they're wonderful. And that was popular entertainment. People, a generation of people, the generation of people who fought the Nazis, would sit down and watch Mr. Smith Go to Washington and feel good about themselves, and then go throw themselves on mines in Europe so people could be free. Our art now is, well, Iron Man is cool because he's tough and kick ass, and he's and all these things. I mean, what is our art now?
Yeah. It's definitely a grim.
I'm too old. I need to go.
Well, we got to put it back in schools and all that.
Yeah.
But that's not going to happen.
It's such a there's such a boon to development, like self-development too, with art, especially like music, especially with the development of the brain and everything. It would be great for that to be a big part of schools again.
The humanities, well, they were called humanities. They're the things that make us human. Humanities were important, but you can't make a profit off that. You can't make money off that. The humanities are just about the point of being on the planet and having some sort of joy from being alive. but nobody can monetize that. Amazon sent me a box of humanities the other day, but it didn't work out. The humanities are critical, and they have been very, very deliberately expunged from our school systems.
I think it goes back to like building that machine you were talking about, where you want that compliance. Like you don't want people to think you want them just to put in their credit card and subscribe to Netflix. Like you just want them to just consume, and not really think of why they're consuming or if they need to consume it. Like you said, their demographic was that 18 to 35-year-old. They're just maxing out their credit cards and they're just buying stuff to buy stuff and not really thinking much about it.
Yeah, a generation that has lost even the ability to understand what permanent economic slavery means, because it's so normalized you don't even think about it.
Yeah.
But art is the big solution to that, and we've been talking about my journey as an artist. And I grew up in misery and murder and violence and blood and stupidity. And I became an artist because I couldn't survive like that. I mean, I guess I could have, but I just, there was
like a retirement plan.
Yeah, but I mean, I saw that all the days stretched ahead. Yeah. I saw the despair of that way of living. And I tried to become an artist. And at first I thought I made a mistake of mistaking craft for art. Marvel movies, spectacularly good piece of craft. Disney movies, spectacularly good piece of craft. Star Trek Discovery, no. But everything else, there's spectacular pieces of craft. But yet, for some reason, probably because of my exposure to Steven and Ralph and these people, I went farther along the road and I tried to become an artist, a legitimate artist, and understand what that means. And which means, being able to see, you have to step out of yourself. You have to position, your allegiances and look at the world the way it is as much as you can, as best you can, knowing that you'll never be able to completely see it objectively, but you have to keep trying. And then trying to talk about that through your art. It is the solution to all the problems of misery and addiction and poverty and all the horror that we deal with in this world that's just about capitalism and profit and grabbing things from the people next to you. The lessons we learn in art would prevent that. It's a different value system. But it's not valued. In my lifetime, I worked hard to become an artist and have come to a place where art is not valued. The artist as someone you can hold up and use as a shield for whatever you're trying to make, maybe the craftsman may be valued, but the process of thinking, of questioning, of looking at the other, looking at yourself, of finding commonalities, of finding differences, of exploring the essential truths of being alive, have been utterly devalued to the point where I look around and I can't even find art anymore. I used to find him in comic books. Jim Starlin came back from Vietnam and fucking did what he did. I mean, that was brilliant. Jack Kirby War II and came back, and I know he did comic books in World War II. You know what I'm talking about. But he came back and he did what he did. You see these artists of just the recent past, not even a generation gone, and what they did. And I don't see that. I don't see noise and opinion being the same thing as questioning and thoughtfulness. So, and I don't know. Either I've lived too long or not nearly enough. Maybe we'll around, or maybe Rome will fall. But remember, after the Rome was 1,000 years of the Dark Ages.
Yeah. I don't think that these systems that we live in are sustainable for much longer. I think we're on the brink of some disruption. So But
yes, but history teaches us that what follows those disruptions, the systems breaking, is not. It's not paradise and lollipops and unicorns.
You're right. Well, there'll be a lot of misery for making new artists. So maybe.
Yeah. Well, there we go.
All right, we can't end this on a down note. So let's get something more.
Yes, we can. Everything sucks. The internet has made you impotent while you've been watching this. There's no chance of happiness.
Yeah.
All right, Kyle or Seamus, you got any other questions you want to throw Mike his way? We've been doing this for a while now.
I do have one question.
Let's see what I can do with it. Really make it horrible. I'm sorry.
It's make me hate it.
So,
how much worse do you think things can get? No, I was joking.
So what do you think of movies? They kill babies to make movies. They use their faces and earlobes to actually make the film. It's a true thing. It happens.
Adrenochrome to run the cameras.
Oh man.
So I mean, you mentioned reading a few times. I'm kind of interested in what your most influential books have been throughout your life.
They've all been banned by the American politics. No, the greatest books ever read. This is an interesting thing. Talking about artists, is I've been just obsessed with Tolkien lately. When I was young, I had gotten injured in a way that I can't talk about. And my uncle handed me Lord of the Rings when I was very young. God, I was 6, 7. And
it's pretty hard for a 6-year-old to read.
It's transportive. It's transportive. I mean, it was a few years later before I learned what all the words meant. But you were like, remember back when comic books had words in them you didn't understand, and then you went, yeah. It was Lord of the Rings, and recently I've been watching the Sigmund Online courses where they've been analyzing all the works of Tolkien, and here's the greatest thing about Tolkien: Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit were the least interesting he ever wrote. An extraordinary amount of unpublished work.
Yep.
The Fall of Gondolin is the greatest epic story I've read in my life. He never finished it. Tour and His Coming to Gondolin is brilliant. Baron and Luthien is Turin Turnbar. He wrote epic tales that were never published and have been published by his son, who just recently died. And they're out there, and it's one of those things I'd say it's an acquired taste. You'll never get people who are fans of Tolkien because of the movie to read these. But if you're a fan of the book, and you can dig through the Silmarillion, and then dig through Unfinished Tales, and then start the history of Middle-earth, you will be rewarded with these epic unfinished stories. The Fall of Gondolin, if you ask me the one project I would want to film, it would be The Fall of Gondolin. It is the most beautiful story of tragedy and epic and triumph of the will, despite, evil's temporary win.
Okay, you can do it, but it has to be in the style of the old original Hobbit cartoon.
Oh, wouldn't that be cool? The Frankenbass stuff?
I mean...
What was it? The Tale of Frodo, the 9 Fingers, and the Ring of Doom. Why does he have 9 fingers? Where is the Ring of Doom? Yes, thank you. That's a song from the Ralph Bakshi Return to the King. Fucking A. Not Ralph Bakshi, Frankenbass. Yeah. Yes, you can't out-nerd me. I'm sorry. It's impossible.
but seriously, would you actually want to do something like that?
No, I would literally punch a monkey in the face if you would let me do The Fall of Gondolin. But he has all these amazing, brilliant, epic tales that, the Lord of the Rings is about the end of a much greater world. That's the whole point of Lord of the Rings. It's the end of the Third Age. Oh my God, he wrote all the other stuff. He wrote the First Age. He wrote the Second Age. He wrote all the stuff. The Amazon series.
Volumes of history.
And it never got published until his son dug through his papers and published it. Thank God for Christopher Tolkien. Everybody, light a candle for Christopher Tolkien. And there's some of the greatest writings ever. I mean, I'm a huge, obviously, fan of all the classics. I read in several different languages. And I obviously love the great American authors of the turn of the century. Steinbeck and Hemingway I mentioned. I mean, American art was brilliant, when it was at its peak. But J.R.R. Tolkien,
Yeah.
fuck me. This guy was touched by there's two artists I've met. I met whose work I keep thinking, okay, that's not real. That was God pretending to be them. One of them is Beethoven. There's no way a human being wrote that stuff. There's no fucking a deaf human being, right? Like that wasn't a clue. Like that wasn't a clue. I mean, when we die and we go up there and we're like, "Hey God, how's it going? Is there anything you want to tell me?" He's like, "Well, I was Beethoven and J.R.R. Tolkien." I'm like, "You were Beethoven?" It's like, "No, a deaf guy wrote that." What? Are you stupid? Go to hell for a few billion. Limbo, 18,000 years. And J.R.R. Tolkien, it's the same thing. It's like, how does subcreation work like? It's impossible, and it's so brilliant. I just got done reading the Notion Club papers, and he did this time traveling Atlantean story that eventually turned into Numenor, and
What?
I can't wait for Amazon to fuck it up with the help of Bad Robot, because they've got such a track record of doing things well. Do you like what we did to Star Trek? Here comes. Sorry.
I actually think it's funny you didn't mention any graphic novels when he asked you about books you're interested in, or books.
I'm sorry, I didn't think of those. I could go through a ton of those. Obviously,
easily Alan Moore, like anything he wrote. I'm assuming, right?
Anything Alan Moore, but also Will Eisner's A Contract with God. If you grew up poor, a lot of his stuff happens on Mulberry Street, where it's just Italian mafia hits and everything famous for, but poor immigrant families. I grew up in a very poor, so like Will Eisner's A Contract with God. He did a couple of other brilliant ones, but A Contract with God is the one that will just break your heart. In terms of graphic novels, which is interesting. Corbin just died. Richard Corbin just died recently, and he had some brilliant stuff through heavy metal. A lot of what we call graphic novels are actually compiled comic collections.
Just a trade paperback, yeah.
Yeah, and that's. I think they should have different names. Yeah, like you said, call them trade paperbacks. But there's a lot of brilliant trade paperbacks. And, obviously Watchmen was a big deal. Alan Moore's run on Swamp Thing is ridiculous. I read it once a year. I obviously read the collected works of, Dicko and I love Kirby's, like, In the Wilderness years. Like after he left Captain America, and he was off doing romance comics and the Boy Commandos and Green Arrow for the Back of Adventures with the worst. And by the way, what was the obsession with hooking Jack Kirby up with the worst inkers possible at all time? I mean, have you seen the Thor stuff with Vince Coletta? It's like, look what you did. I mean, Wally would have been a really good guy to ink Kirby on Thor, don't you think? I love that stuff. I mean, seriously, I transport myself when I read these great graphic novels. I like the Frank Miller Elektra Lives, which was a great little graphic novel he did after his run on Daredevil. I think his Daredevil run was fantastic. I obviously love The Dark Knight Returns. Please don't read The Dark Knight Returns 2 or 3.
They have merit. I said they have some merit. Like they're not like good. Like's a strong word, but I I guess
said fuck you, Josh.
And I'm out. I thought my opinion made you just drop us. Like, no, fuck this guy.
You know what? If you're gonna talk good things about Frank Miller, I'm just gonna go the fuck to bed. It's just no. Sorry. Okay, are there other great collections that people should read through because it's a collecting thing?
No, this is like, if you're like 2 and 3, if like unless you're a diehard fan and like you really like that timeline, those stories, but like even like me, like I didn't get a lot from them, but besides like some closure to some extent, kind of see more of that world. Like it was a fucked up world and a fucked up timeline, which I liked, and just getting more of that exposure.
Well, you know what? I think one of my problems with them is the fact that I read some of John Byrne's commentaries about it, because he told me that like a lot of the mistakes that Frank Miller would make in the Batman history was because he hadn't read the actual comics.
Oh my gosh.
That's
So
awesome.
he actually thought Barbara Gordon was his daughter and stuff,
Okay.
and he just because he hadn't bothered to do his research.
Just run with it.
Yeah. And so it kind of ruined it, especially it's like, what he did with like, oh, look, Batman's got a suit of armor that, okay, this god who could listen hard and blow your head off, but okay, whatever. But I did like the first one.
Yeah.
But, there's some great stuff out there. Like the collections of John Buscema's Conan are stunning. Barry Windsor Smith did the first with Red Nails epic for that. But then everything else that John Buscema did was stunning. You remember the Dracula comic from the with Gene Colan and I think it was Lin Wen?
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't recall it.
In the early 70s. Yeah,
Okay.
There was a Dracula comic.
It was Marvel's Dracula?
Yeah.
With like their monster stuff, like Werewolf by Night and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it was just Dracula. It was drawn by Gene Colan. It was brilliant. It did a great crossover with Doctor Strange, where Doctor Strange killed Dracula, but didn't take. But those are amazing collections as graphic novels. One of my favorite things that's come out recently was John Byrne's Next Men.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you read that. Did you ever read his Danger Unlimited?
No, I did not.
Yes, nobody did. He talks about the fact that like one of the problems with the direct market comic scene is the fact that they always have the orders after the premiere issue.
Mm-hmm.
So like he sells 40,000 premiere issues, and then they cut the order for the half, and then they cut the order for the half after that. It's like, well, before the first ones come out, they've knocked the orders down to 10,000. Nobody can follow the story.
Yeah.
And so he killed it. But that's a really fun read. It's just for the potential of what it could be. It's really great. It's like him doing, his backup for that was Danger Unlimited was like him doing Fantastic Four again.
Okay.
Clearly so, anything Jim Starlin does.
So I know we touched on it slightly of like the movies kind of ruining comics. But what about like comics just kind of ruining comics for themselves?
No, I don't mean the movies ruin comics. Please don't get me wrong. What I mean is
the direction.
The comics chasing the movie audience is what killed comics.
Yeah. But like, what about the comics like really, kind of killing themselves?
Yeah, I mean, what really killed the comics was the direct market.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was like, we used to have to publish 2 million comics to get 1 million bought, and then we would have to eat that extra million. But you had an audience of like 1 million each. They were win buys. You can get them off racks in 7-Elevens and big convenience stores and grocery stores and newsstands, and they were. And so they were all about just the whim buy, the cheap whim buy. And when they went direct market, they all thought they were so clever. I think the first direct market comics were the Teen Titans and Micronauts. I think I'm right about that. Yeah,
I'm
that's
sure the
right.
YouTube
all the girls in the audience. Yeah, all the girls in the audience are like, ooh, what's his number? But wow, that's pathetic. That was
sure it was water you're drinking.
Yeah, but they they isolated it. It's the same thing that TV and movies are doing now. They stripped all the regular people out of the market and just start, okay, we're going to do direct market. And then what happened was that slowly over time, the direct market model meant that they were now no longer writing comic books for people who weren't avid, crazy fans, because only avid, crazy fans bothered to drive down. When I was trying to collect, the original Warlock series, I was going to like resale shops and antique shops, and they sold comics in the back in boxes and all that stuff. It was long before the direct market. And the direct market meant that they changed the kinds of, the comics they were making. And it led to some brilliant stuff. I mean, it led to Watchmen. It led to Grendel.
A broader audience. It gave them access to a broader audience.
Well, but it didn't. It narrowed the audience. I mean, the
I guess
numbers
so.
they were selling. Watchmen didn't sell anything near what a Silver Age Superman sold.
Oh,
A
yeah.
Silver Age Superman was like 3-4 million comics.
Mhm.
I mean, right now the most popular comics in the world are selling 10,000. You know, I mean, I think I'm right about those numbers. And you know, the publishers liked it at first because it reduced their costs. But what eventually it did was it niched them. So they ended up in a situation where they're chasing a market that is by definition getting smaller and smaller because, as you know, most people stop reading comic books at some point, and they weren't getting they weren't getting the kind of new people, kids picking them up by whims in grocery stores and stuff. And
Yeah.
so they started writing comic books for older comic book fans as opposed to like older people.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? It's like, they weren't writing, like in Japan, graphic novels are written for everybody and they're available everywhere. And so if it's geared towards a 35-year-old, it's geared for a 35-year-old. It's not geared for a 35-year-old who has a encyclopedic knowledge of, Batman mythology, such as myself. Which is so, and when then the movies came out, there was this weird fantasy that suddenly comic books, which are now very difficult to find, you have to know somebody who runs a store, or you have to know where these stores are, and then you have to walk into a store that probably has a giant Iron Man mask on it and 17 giant posters of naked women all over the side of it, and stack comics. I'm not saying that's a problem. I'm just saying it's not a very welcoming, inviting place for, like, when my wife and I used to drag her to the comic store, she's, I'd be here. And I'm like, why? She don't do that. And she would leave and I would, like, search around for the comic books, because there's a lot of like imagery there that isn't really welcoming to either children or women. Mm-hmm. And you have to go to the comic book store, and then you usually have to order in advance, and you have to have a pre-sale, and you have to put a tremendous amount of effort into collecting. And as people got old and died, or more likely with comic book artists failed to reproduce, the market got smaller and smaller and smaller. And then they got to the movies, and then it was like, well, we're going to make these more like the movies. But comic book fans at that point, because they put so much effort into it, weren't really about wanting to see a retread of the movie. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I mean, how many Avengers comics did they have when Brian Michael Bendis took, like, New Avengers, New Avengers with Wolverine, New X-Men Avengers, X-Men Avengers with the movie, and on and on and on. Trying to appeal to every kind of little subset that had watched the movie, but nobody who watched the movie could possibly have access. It would be different if they were on spinner racks, like as you walked out of the movie. Why they didn't stick, comic book spinner racks in movie theaters all over America, I'll never know. But how do you get those movie fans to go through all the effort to buy a comic? The answer is they're not going to. They're too busy trying to raise their kids and and hate other Americans. And so what they did was they managed to finally alienate comic book, the hardcore 50-year-old comic book audience, by producing things that were basically just tie-ins with the movies, or chasing the movie characters, or taking orders from instead of editors who knew comic fans, they're taking them from executives who are like the vice presidents of marketing for the movies and all that stuff. And hey, we're going to bring back Barry Allen and all that nonsense. I never collected the Barry Allen comic. I'd spent 15 years investing in Wally West. I didn't want to read about another Flash, and so on and so forth. It could have worked if my kids and everything could have, like, walked through a store and seen a Barry Allen comic and have watched the WB series, and like they might have just like grabbed those comics off the rack and read them. But it was the direct market that just eventually just actually destroyed comics. And I think that's kind of what's happening now with streamers. They're chasing the niche market down a hole that's not gonna build.
Sustainable. It's not going to grow. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. We're gonna look back in the days when things like Buffy and Angel and Firefly and Supernatural could find a way into the public consciousness. It's very difficult to do that with streamers because for instance, I've worked on shows and TV shows that are supposed to be apparently very popular on streamers, and nobody has any idea what I talk about when I name them. It's just like, I work on The Simpsons. Everybody knows The Simpsons.
Yeah.
I work on these other things, and they're all like, I didn't watch that. I don't know what that is. So we're it got depressing again. I'm sorry. I like graphic now.
All right. I think we should start wrapping it up. We've been talking for quite a while. Kyle or Seamus, do you have any other final questions or comments?
No, this has been absolutely awesome. I really appreciate you doing this. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Everything.
Yeah, it's been super
very
dope.
Nice meeting you. Yeah.
I hope so. I'm sorry to be a bummer. It's
been eye-opening, expanding.
You haven't really said anything that we're all not thinking, which is just, I guess it's more depressing if you think about it. You're just vocalizing it, and that's
and considering how we all make our living in pop culture, that's I'm real bummed about pop culture.
So we don't end on kind of a downer. What would you say for the aspiring artists trying to make filet mignon? What would be your advice?
Well,
you can't say don't do it.
No, I'm not going to. I'm not going to, because I think it's very important. But the one thing they should all know for sure is that the act of learning how to draw is the only cause of syphilis. So you're taking that on to begin with. But a lot of famous people have died of syphilis, so I would go for it. No, I'm sorry. I'm kidding.
I've had it 3 times. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. Look, there's worse ways to go. What would I say to the person who wanted to make filet mignon? It's tough. It's the world I live in now. There is a way. You don't have to chase the big players in pop media to be a successful artist and a happy person. What I found was when I stopped doing that, I got happier. I know it's like, oh, he's a bummer. I'm thoughtful. I like to read things. I like to go into this stuff. But to have the intellect, the freedom to think about things and to study history and to bring all that into my art, I make a really good living, is what I should tell these people. And a lot of it is developing shows that don't get picked up, but I get paid to do them. I get paid to fix people's scripts because I understand the structures of storytelling. I understand the 7. And by the way, if you'd like, me to teach those to you, I teach online and at stage32.com all the time. And I try to stay as available as I can to anybody who wants to learn because of what I went through. And I'm always here for the young artist. But what I found, I make a good living just being good at it. So if you want to make filet mignon, don't make bad filet mignon. Put out the effort to learn how to do it. If it's writing, if it's directing, if it's drawing, whatever your particular piece of filet mignon, this analogy has been beaten to death, but I'll keep going. Whatever your particular path is to filet mignon, do it well. Take it seriously. Study it. If you take it seriously, if you learn its history, if you actually divorce your own ego and problems and emotional needs from it, if you see it as important enough that it is bigger than you, there is a great sense of fulfillment, peace, and separation from the chaos of pop world and its nonsense. Facebook doesn't piss me off. I'm studying, the 40,000 years of human art. I'm not going to get offended easily. By what I'm talking about. It gives you a sense of connection and a sense of empathy for other people. I have found through my art, because I take it seriously, an ability to love that I as a child didn't have growing up in violence and hatred. I have found through my art a sense of worth that I didn't have, you know, being a disposable person, you know, growing up in all that pain. I'm very rarely afraid. I'm just very rarely afraid. It is, you know, sometimes for my kids when they get sick. But other than that, as long as you have your art, as long as you have really, you're not chasing other people's opinions of you, you're not chasing titles, you're not chasing wealth, you're chasing excellence, you will always be happy. And you will probably find wealth, and you will probably find success. But you will never find despair. Art never produces despair. It produces the kind of peace that as a young person before I became an artist, I thought was impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely the way to end the show.
Fucking beautiful.
Yeah, no.
Fucking wonderful. Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
Mike.
I won't say anything smart ass to ruin it, I promise.
Oh, no.
Yeah, this is kind of where we're at. Is there anything you want to bless while we have you, like your Twitter, your websites?
I would like everybody to go listen to my brilliant sci-fi show developed with Chris Judge, and then, you know, scream that the media industrial complex make it, or else you won't go watch any more movies from Disney or Warner Brothers or whoever. You'll just flat out refuse to consume media until they make mine. And that is Sentinels, Point of No Return podcast. You can also go to sentinelspodcast.com and you can look at the series pitch, the artwork from the series, and get a hint at some of the character stuff. It is I think a wonderful series. It's an epic space fantasy, old-fashioned stuff like I like, about the end of humanity and what comes after. And I think it's very, very, it's apropos for the times, even though it was created before the times. And it's definitely about putting your mind and heart in the shoes of the other. I love that. Other than that, just please call anyone you know in animation and tell them that, you know, they should, you know, give me as much work as possible, because, you know, they're wasting their lives.
Sounds good.
It's been a pleasure. This is probably one of our coolest interviews ever. So you've been great. I'm very happy this happened tonight. This is awesome.
Yes, thank you.
I hope you guys mean that. It's been a joy meeting you guys. Good luck with the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Get it, and let me know if I can ever be of any help at all.
Yeah, no,
I
definitely.
really appreciate that, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great night.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. I'm going to turn off on purpose this time.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
All right, have a good night.
See ya.